Hey, this is the Ethics Experts. If it's your first time joining us, welcome. And if you are a returning subscriber, hey, bestie, hope you're having an amazing day. You look great today. You see what happens when you subscribe to the Ethics Experts? You get that bonus greeting on every episode. So hit that subscribe button and join us as we change the world by making our workplaces better. I'm here today with Courtney. If you don't know who she is, you should sign up for some social media. She is Chief Compliance Officer at Deluxe and somebody we've done webinars together. I've gotten to know her a bit at some conferences, and you have just such a fresh voice. Super excited to get you on. Again, this is going to be a no pressure, low pressure Ethics Experts episode. Welcome. How's it going today?
It's going great, and thanks for having me on. It's long-time listener, first-time caller kind of thing. It's always fun to talk to people about compliance, and I'm a nerd and could do it all day.
That's what I kind of love about you is you kind of nerd out on this stuff and you're passionate about it and you're authentic and you're fun and you're sarcastic and you're kind of who you are and you bring that to bear in kind of everything that I've seen you do. Let's kind of start there. Like, why are you so sarcastic? Just kidding. Why are you, how did you, why do you think people are so scared to be themselves in this role? Like, what is the mental block?
That's a really good question, and something I've thought about when I'm talking to folks I mentor in our organization. And I think it's fear of not being taken seriously. So starting in my early career as a lawyer, I had a long hair, ponytail, wore suits, looked like a lawyer, acted like a lawyer, talked like a lawyer, and that was fine. But it didn't feel real to me. So you have to put on a persona to go into work. And it didn't get me anywhere. So when I started in the compliance field, I cut my hair short and I said, I'm just going to be who I am. And I'm going to be unapologetic about it. And from there, that has gotten me, my career has soared. And I think it has to do with the confidence you get in being yourself and who you are. But also people can tell when you're being inauthentic with them.
Right.
And you can't build trust and build relationships if you're not being authentic. And so I try to advise folks to get over the fear of being seen as unprofessional or being seen as, too young, too old, too whatever.
Right.
And just be who you are and be that person out loud.
I mean, could you imagine if you did that when you first, like in the early part of your career?
Right. I know. And I think about it and I think to myself, where would I have gone
Yeah.
if I had the courage at that point to just be me? And I think a lot of the courage comes with getting older.
Yeah.
I think once you turn 40, then, and I'm 41, once you turn 40, then all bets are off and you just don't care anymore
Right.
about what other people
In a good
think
way.
of you.
Yeah.
In a good way, right?
Yeah.
Like you've gained enough wisdom to know that it doesn't matter what other people think of you. And so I wish that I could go back and tell my younger self, hey, it's okay to wear big earrings because what you've got to say is important. And I think that particularly with marginalized populations is a message that needs to get through.
Totally.
We're seeing it with the Crown Act and other legislation trying to preserve the right to be yourself. But I think it's also a really good message to send into corporate America. Like, you're going to do better when the people who work for you are being themselves and bringing their whole selves to the table.
Well, in the old economy, that meant less, right? In the industrial economy, if a guy was himself or a gal was herself, it kind of didn't matter. It's like pull the lever, push the button, spit out the widget. Today's economy is so much different. And it's almost like
Absolutely.
these overhangs of these old structures are still kind of plaguing us. They're like vestigial organs or something that kind of choke us out. And, we're kind of around the same age. And I felt like, man, it's taken so long for me to just be myself and just be kind of comfortable in my own skin and, kind of comfortable singing the song in my actual voice instead of trying to mimic these other people. And to your point, like, there's no way to have no one's going to have an actual connection with me if I'm some fake version of myself, because at at nothing else, there's some calories running. There's some algorithm running that's burning sort of mental, emotional, sort of personality calories, keeping some kind of a bizarre facade up that prevents any sort of actual connection. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And I think that we're lucky in the compliance space. It's kind of a excuse me, a come one, come all.
Yeah, right.
Familial kind of relationship. It's not competitive. You're not trying to outdo or be seen as the best in some way, which coming from traditional legal, it is the case. So I think that we all just show up and we're ourselves. And I see it now from, I think Ricardo Pelafone kind of started the be sarcastic. Your tone doesn't have to sound like a lawyer to talk to people back in the day in 2012, 2013. And then it's grown now where we're seeing your entire company is built on authenticity. Come to the table, be yourself, be who you are, have real conversations, even if they're hard sometimes. And I think that has really blossomed just in our industry to the point where we all show up and we're like, yeah, I'm a super nerd. And we're going to be sarcastic and we're going to joke and we're going to support each other no matter which kind of corner we came from.
Well, you know, what's the ironic part of it is like, you know, I guess like everything, like I say, sliced bread is this massive innovation when it's like, oh, you're just slicing bread. It's not even actually that big of a deal. Like this is such like a crazy new chapter to step into where we're authentic and we're people and we're driving human connection. Well, that's what our entire business is. If we're in the business of compliance, it's a business of persuading other human beings to know where the lines on the road are and drive, you know, in between those lines. Why do you think it's taken us so long to kind of get to this, I don't know, this new chapter that we're in? I mean, it seems like it seems so obvious at some level.
It does. I think part of it has been the online, I'll say part of it has been the ability of people to work from home and the ability of people to bring more of themselves into work. So when I think in the last couple of years, it's really exploded. When we all went home, we all started turning our cameras on and you got to see my office. And my office probably reflects exactly what you think it would. It's full of things and they're kind of random, including a goat.
Yeah.
But that gives you some insight into who I am.
Right.
And I can see your background and that gives me insight into who you are.
Right.
And if you have kids coming in, then I can see that you're a family, you have a family or a dog or cat or whatever. And we started learning these pieces about each other in an effort to connect over the internet, over video. And those pieces now we've taken to all of our connections. So we've just said, I want to know who you are in real life, in addition to learning what I need to know about you for my job.
I was totally struck by the irony of this whole thing where when we're in office, we're living in a three-dimensional world. We are interacting with each other in 3 dimensions, and it took us interacting in 2 dimensions to see the true added dimension of your life. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, absolutely. Because when I see things, I go, okay, why is that your background? And why have you chosen this hill with this fire?
Right.
Or, you know, oh, you've got very sharp lapels on. That's a choice. These are all things that you, in the first few minutes of a meeting before everyone's on, you talk about, or you talk about the weather, or you talk about whatever. And it's given people more insight into who we are. And I welcome that, not just because I want people to know me, but because I authentically want to know people. Because our job is, I summarize my job as I help people make good choices. Well, I can't help people make good choices if I'm not speaking to them in a way that matters.
Totally.
Or a way that they can hear it.
You know how different languages have like this one, you know, they'll have like a single word that like explains this really sort of complex thing. I don't know what the word is because I don't speak German, but there's this German word that it's like the sort of epiphany you have when sitting at a stoplight and somebody walks by and you realize that they have a whole life. You know what I'm saying? They're not just like some like NPC. They're like a person and all that stuff. But like, how much do we go through life someone hasn't followed up with something and you're like, oh, this person's a jerk or they don't like me. And then you just find out that like some tragedy happened in their life. Like to your point, us, work from home, all that, all that stuff that came out of the pandemic, I think allowed us to humanize ourselves a lot more. And it allowed us to feel, maybe to my question from before, like more comfortable being the humans that we actually are, you know what I'm saying? Instead of acting like these fake automatons, like bringing our humanity to bear allows us to really accelerate toward actual authentic connection, which then can help us accelerate toward actually helping other human beings make good choices in the context of our business.
Exactly. An example I use, and if he listens to this, shout out to my boss. I'm going to embarrass him a little bit, but prior to the pandemic, one of his pet peeves was if you're working from home and your dog barks, like it made him so angry. So he would just get ridiculously like, oh, it's professional. You're still at work. And I have 4 dogs. And so I was like, this is ridiculous. Dogs bark. You can't help it. When the pandemic started and he was working from home all the time, he's got a giant dog. And I think, she's a Great Dane. And his dog barks more than any other dog I ever hear while we're on calls now. And it's become nothing because he realized it's just nobody's going to make a value judgment based on whether or not your dog is barking or if your baby's crying or if your doorbell rings. And
right.
it's humanized everybody to give everyone more grace, right? We all have more grace than we did before.
Yeah, it's just so powerful. So, I remember when the pandemic was happening and everybody was talking about like, oh, this is accelerating us forward, 5 years from technology. And that's a very sort of like that's a very basic conclusion to draw, right? Like we're using technology in like a much more like forward way, right? Like we're on Zoom calls all the time. Like that's a very basic conclusion, but like it actually drove us forward maybe decades in terms of like the humanization. Because I remember when I was in college, my first business class I took, they were talking about the knowledge work economy and it's so much different than the old industrial economy. And like here we are 20 something years later, and it's like we still haven't like gotten it. We still haven't gotten our like knowledge work economy sea legs. And it's folks like you and in our little corner of the world in ethics and compliance who are making some interesting strides forward that I think are unique. And I think they're innovations that, maybe 15 years from now, I mean, who knows if we have another pandemic, maybe it'll be 3 years, but where like the impact that you're having can actually drive more engagement, that can actually drive better decision-making, that can have a bigger impact on the behaviors that we're trying to affect. How did you arrive at that short of you just saying, hey, I'm going to be myself? Like, what was that sort of exploratory process you went to kind of find your voice in the context of your role?
It actually started before I was in compliance. I was doing a job where I was on calls all the time, but it wasn't video calls. And so I was on calls where I couldn't see anyone and they couldn't see me. And so there was no really understanding of what that person looked like, how old they were, whatever. And I learned through those calls that what I had to say had value and it wasn't being interpreted through a lens of you have a modern haircut or you're wearing giant earrings or whatever. And so I intrinsically started to believe what I have to say in the message I'm sharing is worth sharing. And that's all people need is to hear the message.
Wow.
I'm the messenger and that doesn't really matter because the message is legitimate and it's a good message. So that's kind of how I came to it. But I'll tell you, the first time I stepped into a boardroom where I was giving a presentation to an actual board of a multi-billion-dollar company, our board, I definitely thought, are they going to think I'm an idiot millennial with a weird haircut? And they didn't. To their credit, they didn't. But there's still the pieces of doubt that come in.
Totally. Well, I don't think those will ever go away. Or maybe they do. Maybe when you're 70 or 80 or something, when you really just don't care about anything. Like maybe there's levels to this. We're just like having the first taste of it or something right now. But it's kind of interesting as well that like this sort of comfortability of being you in your own skin was achieved by like your disembodied voice on a just a phone call, right? Like and that fed into the confidence of like, hey, my message matters. And I think there's a lot of that like insecurity. I mean, we're all human beings. We all have, and I mean, I'll speak for myself. I have insecurities for sure. I have imposter syndrome and all that kind of stuff. But just having the confidence to try something new, to innovate, or to just, really stand on the truth that my message matters can allow for sort of so much exponential impact, to happen in the context of our compliance communication, or the ethical culture that we're building. When you first got your job, so maybe let's back up. I want to circle back to this whole thing, but like, talk to us how you went from a young Courtney who wanted to be an astronaut or something to now, Courtney who's running, chief compliance officer for the company that you're at now. What did that path into compliance look like?
So college, law school, big law for a hot minute. I did some business litigation, realized very, very quickly I hated it, came back to Minnesota. So I was in New York for a bit, came back to Minnesota and worked for Thomson Reuters, which if you're in the legal industry, they sell Westlaw. My job was tangential really to legal, required a law degree, but I wasn't really doing what I would call practicing. One day, the girl who sat next to me stood up and said, "My brother is the recruiter for this job at this compliance organization. I think you would be really good at it. Do you want to apply?" And I looked at the job description and I called her brother, and 2 weeks later I started at SEC.
Oh, cool. Interesting.
So I go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no. Keep going. I'll come back.
And from there, I realized, I think really quite quickly, that I found my niche. Like, I dove in and I loved it from minute one.
Interesting.
So it was one of those things where I went, oh my gosh, this is what I've been searching for all my life as far as fulfilling work. And it just clicked and it just fit. And so then I just started learning everything I can and talking to all the people I could talk to. And when I left the SCCE, I am so thankful for what I learned and getting me to be able to apply for the job at Deluxe. And I've been at Deluxe 5 years, continuing to learn and grow, and always kind of adding to the toolbox.
Right.
But it was love at first sight, I think, with compliance.
Isn't that funny? So let's back up a little bit. So you went into business litigation. What was it during, like, you're in law school, law school is its own animal, I think, from what I kind of understand. There's 1,000 different paths out of law school. There's 1,000 different things you can do. What was it about, I guess before that, what was it, like, when did that light bulb go on for you that said, man, I really want to be a lawyer? And I really wanted to go to law school. What kind of drove you to that? And then when you were in law school, about to kind of take the plunge out of the nest, so to speak, what was it about business litigation that sort of you thought you were going to get there from like a fulfillment standpoint? You know what I mean?
Oh my gosh. These are heavy questions. No, I don't remember ever wanting to be anything other than a lawyer.
Interesting.
So as long as I can remember, I've wanted to be a lawyer. I think it probably comes from being a kid. When you argue or you challenge something, people go, "Oh, you should be a lawyer." Starting from, I remember in 4th grade, we had to do a project. What do I want to be when I grow up? And that was lawyer. And from then on, it was always, I'm going to go to law school. And so I majored in poli-sci, minored in forensics. So cool. Like fingerprinting, dead bodies, bullets,
blood spatter,
the whole thing.
Yeah.
Blood spatter, the whole thing. And so I just surrounded myself with legal things. Went to law school. While I was in law school, I got a job at a small firm that had at the time 3 law clerks. And we were kind of split up to help different lawyers at the firm. And the lawyer that I was tasked with helping was a business litigator. And so I spent 2.5 years while working for that firm doing business litigation. And so when I graduated law school, it was kind of the only thing I really knew. Law school doesn't prepare you to be a lawyer. They teach you a bunch of fluffy concepts, but they don't teach you how to actually write a motion or how to serve someone paperwork.
Interesting.
Or file something with the court. Like, they don't teach you those pieces. And so when I came out of law school, it was the only thing that I felt competent to do. And so I did it. I went, I need to start paying off these loans.
Right.
And I know how to do one thing kind of well. And so that's what I did. When I got into practice, I realized that it's not who I am to litigate. I did mock trial all through college, and I have no problem being in front of people, court, jury, everything, but I just didn't like it.
Yeah.
I didn't want my entire life to be caught up professionally fighting, which is what litigation is.
Right.
So I did it for about 6 months and then realized
you knew
this is hurting my soul.
Yeah. And was it just what was it about? You know, it's an interesting way you put that. I didn't want to spend my life fighting. What was it about that whole thing that was so like soul sucking for you? Was it like the hollow victories? Was it all this work for nothing that didn't really matter? Or, you know what I'm saying? Why were they empty calories?
When you're a litigator, nobody comes to your office or picks up the phone because they had a good day.
Right.
And I am someone who I'm generally optimistic, despite the fact that I'm very sarcastic. I tend to think that the world is good and humans are good, and that there's some good to be contributed. And to me, in the particular cases I was working on, it felt like really rich people fighting other really rich people about who's going to be slightly more rich later.
Right.
And that felt very hollow, in that I'm just helping people fight over money.
Right.
And so it wasn't fulfilling. I will tell you, the atmosphere in kind of big law is also not a particularly welcoming.
It's like a shark
atmosphere.
pit. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a shark pit. Like, oh, you can wear jeans to work, but they have to be $700 jeans.
Right. And please iron them.
Please iron them, and then also you have to have $5,000 shoes on.
Right.
And so it was.
Isn't that funny?
I just didn't fit. Yeah. Isn't it insane? It's because I was like, jeans to work, this is amazing. And then everybody, I don't even know where to get $700 jeans. To this day, I wouldn't know. I would have to Google it. So yeah, it's just not who I am. And I think as a person, I spend so much of my time working, as we all do, that I need to feel connected to what I'm doing in order to be fulfilled in life generally.
No offense to lawyers, but I saw this documentary about, it was like a BBC documentary. If you've seen this is like so nuts. They had, they took like 10 or 12, like 12-year-olds, all boys. They put them in a house unsupervised for a week. And they put 12, girls, same age, in another house unsupervised for a week. And it was like exactly what you would imagine. Like
Lord of the Flies.
Oh, it was, yeah. It's like inevitably you do that and it's going to be Lord of the Flies. It's like inevitably in any circumstance you put a bunch of lawyers together, even in a sort of a casual environment, there's going to be the sort of one-upmanship because you are dealing with the sort of aristocracy of like the working world. I'm so struck by that, that jeans thing. It's like, hey, it's a casual environment, but they better be $1,000 jeans. I mean, it's nuts.
Right.
Yeah. Anyways, so tell me, so you said, I got to get out of here. I mean, good on you for hitting that eject button within 6 months. I mean, that's very smart. I mean, a lot of people get caught up in that and then they're like 10, 15 years later and they're like, I knew the first year I shouldn't have been doing this. How did you get the courage to like jump out of that?
So I graduated law school in 2009, which the economy was in a recession. There weren't a lot of jobs, and it is by pure luck. My husband, we've been married since before I went to law school. He had a job that allowed me to be unemployed for a little while. And it was pure luck that we could depend on his income. And I didn't have to stay there, that I was allowed to kind of follow what I wanted to do. So it's 100% that we were in a position to do that. And I don't take that lightly, because it was a privilege to be able to quit your job, especially in 2009. And so it was the support of my husband who said, hey, I can carry us until you find something new. It didn't take long to find something new, thankfully. But that's where it was, I recognized this. And then it was, well, work is, by definition, you're exchanging your time and talents for money. So why do you need to be fulfilled by it? And my answer was, because I do. And that was a good enough answer for my husband and I to decide that I could get off that path and get onto a new one.
You seem like the type of person that, like, once something's clear to you, you're kind of moving on. Yep.
I'm fairly decisive.
Yeah, yes. That's the word. See, I couldn't even decide on the word because I'm not that way. So you went to Thomson Reuters, and then your friend who sat by you said, hey, I think you'd be great for this role. I mean, she was proven to be right for sure, but, like, what do you think she saw in you that caused her to say, hey, you should go and talk to my brother?
So shout out to Tina. She's not listening, but I'm going to send this to her so she does. We went to law school together, worked somewhere during law school together, and then we're at Thomson Reuters. So we've known each other for a couple of years at that point. And I think the position was for managing social media at SCCE, but I think she knew, like, I'm really outgoing and you have a lot of things to say, and you probably will understand compliance if you go look at it hard enough, enough to just say, hey, this is a curious job, and slightly less, I don't want to say boring, but slightly less repetitive than the work we were doing at Thomson Reuters. You're a strong extrovert. Do you want me to forward you an email or a link? So I think it was just probably being extroverted, maybe.
I mean, how wild though, right? I mean, how wild. I mean, if you didn't take that job there, or her brother didn't get that thing, I mean, maybe you would have found your way into it. But for all those sort of stars to align, that's serendipity, to then find something where you step in and it sounded like pretty quickly you're like, I'm home. This is the place for me. Yep. I mean, that's absolutely nuts.
Yeah, it was very serendipitous.
Yeah.
And there's no way I could retrace that or tell someone to do what I did.
Yeah, just find a Tina.
Sit next to someone whose brother is a recruiter for a completely different industry.
Yeah.
It was completely chance.
Totally.
And had I been sick that day or been on a call when she thought about it, there's a million things that could have not ended up this way.
Totally.
But
wild.
It did. And I'm eternally thankful that it did.
So when was this? This was what, 2012 area? 2013? When did you join SCCE?
2013.
2013. So bring us in.
Yeah.
We're starting the episode. What was the state of ethics and compliance? What was the state of SCCE at that sort of point in time? We're sort of kind of coming out of the recession a little bit. Like, What's the lay of the land at that point?
So they brought me in to really start focusing on more online social media kind of communications, of being a bigger presence online, and in the thought leadership. So SCCE has been doing conferences, and that's kind of what they're known for. They had their magazine for members, but they didn't have a lot of real thought leadership happening online. So if you Googled them, you got kind of a formal site, right? They would post on social media, but a lot of it was really promoting events, right? And so they had the vision to actually become a thought leader. So when I was brought in, I was tasked with starting the blog, which is still super active. Adam Turtletaub now, I think, owns that and does a great job.
Shout out to Adam.
And then shout out to Adam. We love Adam. And then a couple years later, I bullied them into letting me start a podcast.
Oh, cool.
And so I started, if you've ever listened to Compliance Perspectives,
Yeah.
if you go way back, I started it and it was awkward and was awful. And Adam has now perfected it and it's his. But the first few episodes were me
Cool.
in a basement with the microphone being super awkward and super nervous. So it was really about just kind of expanding the reach of the organization.
Yeah. And that's back when podcasts were first kind of happening. That was like a innovation. Like that was probably a first mover thing, wasn't it?
I think there were Tom Fox was doing podcasting.
Okay.
But I think he was kind of the only one really out there doing it. There weren't a lot of voices. Now there's a whole bunch of people talking about compliance everywhere, which warms my heart so much to hear people talk about it. But back in the day, it wasn't. And it was very formal, talking about the formal, informal split. Like we would go through with those people I interviewed, like a formal outline. Here's the questions I'm going to ask you. Here's what you're going to answer with. And now if Adam calls and says, you know, hey, I need a guest for the podcast, I go, okay, give me a half an hour. And we'll just riff on whatever comes up.
Totally.
So
yeah, it's cool to see that that progression. A lot of voices, a lot of like niched out conversation types. You know, they've sort of moved in many cases to a way more organic interaction, and that's pretty cool. So you did a lot then at SCCE to sort of, you know, push its impact and humanize it, I guess, to some degree. What did you learn most from that whole thing? Because it seems like you look really kind of fondly on your time there. What are some of the big lessons or the big tools, as you called them, that you took in your toolbox to your current role that have been able to really push, you know, the impact of ethics and compliance forward in your organization?
First and foremost, and this is going to sound so cheesy, I learned that I really like compliance people, and compliance people are my people. And so that meeting all of the people, I would go to most of the events. And so meeting thousands of people a year, interacting with them on the blog and social media, and in person, I came to realize very quickly that these are good people who I want to know and I want to be friends with in real life, in addition to wanting to know them professionally. And so that was kind of the first thing that got me really excited about thinking like, oh, this is compliance. I've found where I need to be. Mm-hmm. I think the second thing was the environment of learning. So I touched on this a little bit earlier in our conversation, but in compliance, we share. If we have answers, we share them. If we have problems, we ask others for help. And that environment was so refreshing, instead of the kind of like mine, don't look, only I'm allowed to know this environment that I had come from previously, that it struck me as so much of a community,
right,
that I wanted to be a part of. And then the last thing was the mission of compliance, right? So we're helping people do the right thing. We're helping people know what the right thing is and helping them do that. And that's just good for the world and the universe. And so with all of this, I was able to then learn how to turn all of this passion I had for compliance into a career of actually doing compliance. So, you know, learning how to write a code of conduct and how to pick training and who to talk to for investigations. All of these pieces came from the relationships and friendships I built, as well as the greater compliance community just being available and thoughtful to share what they knew.
I mean, it's such a unique thing, this community that we're a part of, which I'm talking about all the time, because most other industries aren't like that. And it almost takes having sort of swam in a swamp to like appreciate swimming in an actual pool, where it is collegial and it is a community, and you can reach out to even a competitor who's in the same position, and they're willing to share with you how they were able to drive a policy forward or whatever those things are. I mean, it is such a massive opportunity that I see so many people not taking advantage of. How do I get that out there? How do you get that out there? How do we activate this thing? Because it is really, we can have an exponential impact. And I just think, to your point, if we can help people make good decisions and we can give people belonging, and we're human to human, connection points within a broad, and from a corporate perspective, we can really drive a lot of good in the world by making our workplaces better. So how do we kind of accelerate that down the road faster?
I lost you, Nick.
Yep. We had some technical difficulties, so we are going to circle back for a part 2 with Courtney. Thank you so much for joining us. Until next time.